Hi, I'm Rishi Vora and I'm the author of I Am Mama Mumbai, published by Vishwakarma Publications. The Pune International Literary Festival is very special to me because I Am Mama Mumbai was launched there. The book is about obstacles. We all have something about us that we don't like, something that prevents us from achieving our dream. And I Am Mama Mumbai is just about that. It revolves around a protagonist, Rudra, who stammers, and he wants to be an actor, but his stammering is the only thing that prevents him from achieving his dreams. But when life hits rock bottom, his only way is up, and the only way that he can stand on his feet is by conquering his fears and speaking. So it's not just about stammering, it's about those obstacles that prevent us from achieving our dreams. And through the book, we see that if we are able to overcome those obstacles, if we are able to overcome those fears, then the universe will meet us halfway and help us achieve our dream. So please do get the copy of the book and please read I Mama Mumbai and enjoy yourself at the Pune International Literary Festival. Thank you.
Welcome back to Studio 2. We will now begin your next session, War in So Many Words, with our overseas panel of eminent speakers. Kriyat Al Madon is a Palestine Syrian poet born in Damascus in 1979, who settled in Stockholm in 2008. He has published 4 poetry collections in Arabic, and his work has been translated into 15 languages. He was granted the 1 year long DAAD Artists in Berlin Program Award scholarship and is now based in Berlin. His poetry film, Evian, won the Zebra Best Poetry Film Award 2020. Our next speaker is Melangel, is an author, poet, and translator. Her first novel, Why Kriyat Pet, won the coveted National Estate Literature Medal in 2009. She writes in both Welsh and English and often collaborates with authors and poets internationally to translate literature between minority languages. She works as a lecturer in creative writing at the American University of Paris, France. She has collaborated with Indian poets and one of the participants in the project, Poetry Connections India Wales. Our next speaker, Rabab Haider, is a Syrian poet, novelist, journalist, and translator from Latakia, Berlin. Her first novel, The Land of Pomegranates, was published in Arabic in 2012, and after which she completed 2 more novels. She was awarded the Heinrich Bohr Scholarship in 2018 and has lived in Germany since. She's been writing for Der Zit and is on the editorial team of Abab, the Arabic newspaper in Germany. Alexander Bakler will be moderating this session. Alexandra is a director of literature across frontiers, European platform for literature exchange, translation, and policy debate. Based in Wales, UK, she has published over 25 titles as editor and translator. Literary Europe Live Plus, one of the LAF's current projects co-founded by the Creative Europe program of the European Union, focuses on the refugee literary diaspora in Europe. I will now ask Alexandria to moderate the session.
Welcome to the session, War in So Many Words. I'm Alexandra Buchler, and it's a great pleasure to be here at the Pune International Literary Festival. Thank you, Manjiri, for inviting us and inviting Literature Across Frontiers to contribute to this digital edition of the festival. After we came last year with 3 European writers, and we actually took part in quite a number of sessions then, and really enjoyed being there and enjoyed meeting the audience. That event in 2019 was done in cooperation with the Cultural Relations Platform in Brussels and the EU delegation in India. Today's event is supported by Creative Europe, the program of the European Union that supports cultural cooperation. And I would like to thank this program for supporting our work to date and allowing us to engage in dialogues through literature across Europe and between Europe and other regions. This is a pre-recorded session, so unfortunately we won't be able to take questions from the audience. And I just wanted to point that out. Now, war and its human cost is the focus of this session with 3 writers whose work reflects the continued political turmoil of the 20th and 21st century. From 2 world wars, the Holocaust, the Nakba, and the more recent conflict in the Middle East that has created a new diaspora. We are speaking to you from the UK and from Germany, but each of us have a very different background, and it's been our aim at Literature Across Frontiers to highlight the cultural and linguistic diversity of Europe and create spaces for dialogue through literature and translation. I will now introduce the speakers, and what we're going to do is each of them will present their work and talk about it. And if we have time left, we will then have a discussion. Kriyat Al Madon is a Palestinian Syrian poet born in Damascus in 1979, who settled in Stockholm in 2008. He has published 4 poetry collections in Arabic, and his latest collection, Adrenaline, was published in English translation by Catherine Cobham in 2017. His poetry has been translated into 15 languages. He was granted the 1-year-long DAAD Artist in Berlin Program Award Scholarship and is now based in Berlin. His poetry film, Evian, which we will show part of, or maybe the whole, in this pre-recorded session, won the Zebra Best Poetry Film Award, and we will talk about it later. Sian Melangel David is an author, poet, and translator from Wales. Her first novel, The Third Thing in English translation, was published in 2009, and it won the coveted National Eisteddfod Literature Medal. The National Eisteddfod is the Festival of Welsh Culture. Her second novel, Philo, came 10 years later, and it was awaited impatiently. It traces the story of Italian prisoners of war sent to work on farms in Wales. So it goes back to the Second World War and the aftermath. She was the last co-editor of the iconic Welsh language literary magazine Taliesin, and she lectures in creative writing at the American University in Paris. She writes in both Welsh and English and often collaborates with authors and poets internationally, including Indian poets. One such collaboration brought us Different Water, a book which was published in 2018, and which is the outcome of a project in which she collaborated with the Malayalam poet Anita Thampi, who is well known to Indian audiences. Rabab Haider is a Syrian novelist, journalist, and translator from Latakia, and she is now also based in Berlin. Her first novel, The Land of Pomegranates, tracing the life of 3 women from the Alawite minority in Syria, was published in 2012. She also writes in Arabic. She continues writing in Arabic, and she has now lived in Berlin for 2 years. She completed 2 more novels, but she is reassessing them in the light of her new situation. She was awarded the Heinrich Böll Scholarship in 2018, and as I said, she has lived in Germany since.
Actually, this novel, I started writing it in Syria, like what you said. I didn't. It was a crazy time, so I don't trust it anymore. I needed to come here to relax a little bit so I can reassess my point of view. Because in the wartime, you are in the edge of everything. You are in a very extreme position. You have really to, what you said, my novel is not translated, but all my other texts are translated. And that was what I was working on in Syria. I was pouring out my feelings towards the war and the craziness I was in. So now I started to rewrite it again, actually. And this is one of my characters. Her name is Shireen, and it's just a passage to introduce Shireen, who is she, in my new novel. Shireen was left with no choice but to head back to Damascus. So she booked a seat in a bus. Buses are safer than a car driven by a woman, says the war advice. The porter, his left arm swung dead. The left arm did not look like it had died long time ago. Rather, it seemed to remember that it was still strong and alive a short while ago. Thus the porter stumbled with it for a second before he tucked it in his pocket, and with his right arm he pulled Shireen's big bag and dropped it heavily into an open, rectangular wooden box, like a coffin of a child. On 4 small wrinkled wheels attached to the porter with a rope tied around the coffin and to his shoulder. When the porter moved, the coffin attached to him would follow. The porter with one arm alive walked with 2 feet minus a quarter, since his right step was half a step because of an injury in his right hip. Yet Shireen did not notice all that, for she was lost in an idea in her head concerning the concept of time and the weight. She, in her head, went astray from the porter, far from the war, from the taxi that dropped her, the burned buildings to her left, the buses to her right, unaware of all the men and women who were gazing at her in suspicion and distrust, for she did not have the vibe of fear, which distinguishes the people of wartime. The weight, thought Shireen to herself. The weight, unlike what Beckett said, is nor empty, neither dull, but rather full of foolery. A gap manipulates you to fill it up, as to lit the 50 cigarette. though your lungs stop at the cigarette number 41, as to trigger an event or cause an injury to oneself. So you have the chance to call an ambulance and spend some time in the hospital. A foolery is to construct a phony love or a forged friendship trying to pass the time or trying to kill the time. A foolery, an absurdity, is to try to kill the time. Killing time is an idiotic attempt to try. Rather try to kill the weight. If the weight is inside a false hope, spit the hope out to the ground and wipe it with the heel of your shoes in the dirt. If the weight inhabits some place in the heart, shut it down and walk away. Walk away. You can live with a little bit of heart. And when the weight is a thought in your head, cut your head off. A body with no head. Headless, as when you dance, for example, or in an act of having a violent, shallow sex. Or else, you can always plan a well-framed, buckled murder. Kill someone who has the features of the person you are waiting for, his hair, his color, his eyes, his hands, or his star sign. You may also plan a series of well-constructed crimes. Thought Shireen to herself, now in the bus. Unwind in her cozy warm seat, she feels sudden content as she places her shawl like a blanket on her knees, while the bus is moving slowly like a huge elephant towards the gates of the main bus station, heading to Damascus. Still 6 hours to arrive. Thank you.
This is from your unpublished novel, not your first novel. Can you tell us a little bit about it? Where is it set? Who, when? What? Tell us about the characters.
Yeah, it's set in the beginning of the war in Syria. It was the revolution at the time, when the characters are really not aware of the depth. One of the characters not really aware of the depth of the math. Problems will come over because sometimes a human being will not believe the fear until he drops inside the fear. I will shed light on what happened in Syria from my point of view, from what happened in daily life. Of course, war was everywhere, but for the people who live in war, it becomes the norm, the normal life. You adjust as a human being. You are so fast to adjust to the problems that you face. Still the fear, still the horrible scenes, but then somehow your brain becomes a little bit numb. It's more intense from outside. From inside, you just have to survive. This is the only thing. Even you don't fear death anymore. You just continue living day to day, morning to evening, to sleep, to wake up the next morning. My characters will be shaken by those problems, by the scenes. We will see the destruction of war, not firsthand. You will not see the blood, really, but the echo of the war from inside. What happened to the people there? What reactions to have in front of the news that they are really facing, in front of the death that is in the news or in the screen, but you are really in it. So,
thank you. Let's return to this later. What you said, and the way people, I suppose, who are in the middle of these situations develop a kind of coping mechanism. And also you mentioned fear several times, and I think that's another strong feeling which will come up later, because it is a feeling that obviously those who are experiencing the conflict feel, but also when we look at the situation we are facing in Europe now, in terms of the numbers of refugees coming here or attempting to come, what plays a role is fear. Is fear of the unknown, is fear of these people we don't understand, we don't know their individual circumstances. I will now ask Kriyat to talk about his film. We will actually see the poetry film, and I will just introduce it very briefly. the film is called Evian, and it's a reference to a conference which was held in 1938 in France, in the place where the famous water comes from. And it was a conference which brought together, I think, 32 countries to discuss the situation of Jewish refugees who were fleeing persecution in Nazi Germany and Austria. The countries could not come to an agreement about how to collectively face this situation. And today we have a parallel of this situation in terms of the refugees coming across the Mediterranean. So we will watch the film, and then I will ask Kriyat to comment on it.
في السنة الماضية، على سبيل المثال لا الحصر، توفي قارب محمل باللاجئين بسكتة قلبية. حين وصلت أول سفينة إلى مكان الاستغاثة، كان البحر الأبيض المتوسط قد غرق تماما. وجدوا الماء مختنقا، وجدوا الأمواج مبللة بالمياه، وجدوا الاتحاد الأوروبي يحاول أن يتعلق بقطعة خشب من بقايا القارب لكي ينجو. لم يجدوا الأطفال. نتائج التحقيق الأولية أشارت بشكل واضح إلى أن صور الأقمار الصناعية قد أظهرت أن القارب الغارق لم يكن يعرف السباحة. في نشرة أخبار 8 مساء، وبينما كانت مياه البحر الأبيض المتوسط تسيل بهدوء من التلفزيون إلى الأرضيات الخشبية في غرف الجلوس، مسببة ارتباكاً بين العائلات السعيدة في البلاد الآمنة، ومحدثة اضطراباً من الدرجة الثانية على الأداء الجنسي للأغلبية الصامتة في وسط وشمال أوروبا، وبطريقة مباغتة تشبه نمو الفطر في الغابات، تساءلت سيدة أوروبية من الطبقة الوسطى عن سبب مجيئهم عن طريق البحر وليس بالطائرة بعد حصولهم على الفيزا. لشدة البراءة البيضاء انتحر التلفزيون. في تعليقه على الحادث المأساوي، قال مسؤول الاندماج في دائرة الهجرة في اتصال هاتفي: ماذا سنفعل الآن؟ لقد ماتت الشحنة الجديدة من اللاجئين الذين سينظفون خراء المتقاعدين الأوروبيين العجائز. في نشرة أخبار 8 مساء، قالت مذيعة بيضاء لم تنجب أطفالا من قبل، نقلا عن متخصص بشؤون الشرق الأوسط لم يزر الشرق الأوسط من قبل: إن الأطفال ربما قد يكونوا اختفوا لأسباب ما بعد حداثية حين كانوا يلعبون الغميضة. عيسى ابن مريم كان الناجي الوحيد، وجدوه يمشي فوق وجه الباب. هامش واحد: سيسرقون وظائفنا وبيوتنا، وسيهمون نساءنا. سيستحوذون على الموارد التي خصصناها للفقراء، وسيتسلل بينهم المجرمون والجواسيس. تدفقهم سيزعزع الاستقرار وسيؤدي إلى تفكك المجتمع. مظهرهم سيء وينقلون الأمراض، معاييرهم مغايرة وثقافتهم مختلفة وأخلاقهم غريبة، ولن يستطيعوا الانضباط. هامش 2. جميع الكلمات العنصرية التي وردت في هامش 1 لا تحيل إلى أزمة اللاجئين الحالية كما يسمونها، والتي يقصد بها اللاجئون السوريون في هذه الأيام، إنما استعملت على نطاق واسع من قبل وسائل الإعلام الغربية بوصف اللاجئين اليهود من ألمانيا والنمسا الذين حاولوا الفرار من النازيين في فترة ما قبل الحرب العالمية الثانية. هامش 3. في عام 1938 اجتمع 32 بلدا في مؤتمر فيينا لمناقشة أزمة اللاجئين اليهود. رفضت الولايات المتحدة زيادة الحصة السنوية للاجئين حتى قبل بدء الاجتماع. بريطانيا صرحت إن المملكة ليست بلدا للهجرة. جميع الدول رفضت استقبالهم. في تاريخ 13 يوليو كتبت جريدة الحزب النازي والتشربي باتن بنبرة منتصر: لا أحد يريده. لدي إحساس داخلي أن الذي كتب المقال هو أدولف هتلر شخصيا. بعد 4 شهور من نهاية المؤتمر قام النازيون بليلة الانتصار، ثم بدأوا تدريجيا بحل المشكلة اليهودية بطريقتهم الخاصة التي انتهت كما نعرف بالحل النهائي.
I really believe in what Karl Marx say, not exactly what he say. He say that when he say about history that it's repeated itself, he say first is tragedy, and he say second is farce, or I like to prefer to say it a comedy. The second always come as a comedy. And in this sense, I really don't believe in it that it's comedy, even if it's like to see that the Nazi came in the 30s and Trump now it's little comedy. It's like but I believe that what happened with the Syrian now it take the first part that history repeat itself. I was shocked when I know about this conference in Evian. I got to know it through Linda Polman and her book called in Holland, Nobody Want Them, and she quoted me in the book. I have no idea about that, and then she invited me to be with her in her release. And I got to know that it was in that time called refugee crisis, and actually they refused to accept even one Jewish. And the most important thing is 4 months after July 1938, this conference, the Crystal Night began. And what I want to say that, I don't want to say that what happened with the Syrian now is a repetition of what happened in that time, but what I want to say that we have really, every generation build his memory without connected to the past. Don't forget that country like Belgium was empty in the First World War. That refugees from the civil war of Spain tried to enter France, but France closed the borders and they were shooting them. They throw them in Algeria. The Mediterranean was a lot, thousands. I don't want to say 100,000 of the European immigrants were heading to Morocco and Algeria and Tunisia. People forgot that. People forgot that the history of immigrant is a white history. 95% of immigrants all over the world, they're white from Europe. They go to Latin America, to Australia, they forgot that. But and now the immigrant is less than 1% in all European Union. So there is no crisis. This is really shameful. And it's really against our values as European or people who live in Europe right now. What I want to say through that film or through the poem itself, to remind myself first before the other people. I really want to not be changed when I got old, because you see all the people who were left in the 70s, now they are voting for the right wings. I don't want to be in that situation in the future. I don't want to have a fish memory. So I wrote this poem to remind myself. It jumped from the Syrian who drowned in the Mediterranean. Suddenly you find yourself speaking about Evian conference, and I know that's happened much before in the history, but was not recorded like Evian. They were not documented, it was in the past, and it will happen again in the future. My poetry is really not connected to politics, but it's really connected to my life. And it is part of my life. All my friends either they got killed or they are immigrant or refugees now all over the world. So it's really related to my life. And then after that, I decided to make the film because I love to make poetry films, and it's arrived to another kind of audience who didn't read poetry books.
Now let's turn to Shan, who will read from her recently published novel. Again, she chose a situation which is really, I think, is not very well known or remembered in the UK and in Wales. So can you tell us about the book and the story and read us an extract?
Of course, Alexandra, thank you to begin with. It's been fascinating to listen so far. So this novel, Philo, I can show it to you right there. Philo is not a Welsh language word, so in case that confuses anyone, Philo is actually an Italian dialect word from the Pieve di Soligo area in Veneto, and that's where my protagonist comes from, Guido Fontana. So we have 12 boys, really not men, who are on a ship after the Battle of El Alamein, and they're shipped first to Glasgow and they are distributed to various camps all over the UK. So we've just been talking about whose story it is, and in some very odd way, this is also my story, or the story of my family. We were very lucky that an Italian prisoner of war called Piero Busetti, among others, stayed on my grandparents' farm as a prisoner. And he became a member of the family. Ultimately, my dad remembered him as an honorary uncle. He came back to Wales after the war to work, and the connection was lost. And when I was 11 years old, my dad found some drafts of letters my grandmother had found. And off we went to Italy to knock on doors to find people. So I had a story I wanted to address. It was our family story, but I also wanted to avoid telling that exact story. So it started very much as a collective story. It wasn't Guido who was telling his story, but there was a sort of a choral voice saying this happened to us, as it were, and that was sort of a literary experiment. And I drew back from that so that Guido himself became more of the speaker, but speaking on behalf of the 12 boys on that ship, among many others. So it's a story very much about storytelling. The reason for that is the meaning of philo is getting together to tell stories. And as I wrote, I found that I was echoing the shape of another war, so not the Second World War, but something from Welsh mythology in the Mabinogion. And there is a tale of a war where the Welsh go to Ireland. I'm really shrinking the story for you, but at the end of the war, where their leader, Bendigeidfran, has his head cut off, almost like an Orpheus figure, they go to Gwales, an island where this decapitated head tells stories, and the soldiers, they forget the atrocities of the war, and they live in this fictional storytelling world until somebody gets frustrated and they open the door that they are not supposed to open, and the door is opened, and in flood the memories and everything that they were unwilling to face through storytelling. So I echoed that shape in part because my understanding of the Italians I had connection with, and with whom I've spoken to since, is that they had actually many of them had a great time in Wales. And Philo is also the title of a very famous poem by Andrea Zanzotto from Pieve di Soligo. So this getting together to tell stories became important, and then the flooding memories. So I'll read a short bit from before the floodgates opened and after the floodgates opened for you in English translation. So what you need to know as we jump into the story is that Guido Fontana is speaking, and the other 11 are around him in this philo telling stories, and they begin stories by saying things like, I had a dream, Osvaldo said, that I was awake, and he tells the story of dreaming and finding God behind the bedposts in his grandmother's house and things like that. So we slept like babies between Philo and Philo, our ship the Malaya still a luxury, forse, men snoring and grinding their teeth, others whistling in the darkness. There was a nightingale, there was a red robin, cicadas, frogs. There were screamers and sparkling eyes. There was Mario reciting his 3 times table, tripping over the 7th and waking up. 36, one of us would say, 37. At that time, all our voices are so similar, we could hardly say which had opened his mouth. The voice of sleep, the voice of counting, our voice. 42, then 7 volte, 7 times 7, of course, porca puttana, ca 42. We were better schoolboys on the ship than we'd ever been in real school. Young bodies in slim beds, metal things like abacus, a rack of some sort, one after the other. Mattresses marked with a dark shape in the middle, traces where other men had lain, and then not lain, vanished from the spot, poof, forse, turned into a ghost or a hair or something. Just a stain left behind. Maybe they all went to America too. Yes, sicuro, sicuro, we said. We had no pillows, wool blankets from Wales, they said, things that scratched private parts and gave sex a hoarse singing voice, greasy floors, dents in the ceiling, and spots appearing from beyond our heaven, miles under where heaven was supposed to be. The Greeks have a goddess who looks after the hearth, Hestia, Elmo said the next time, sort of inviting us into another philo. Ladro, Beppe said. I said that first. I'm the one saying it now, Elmo said, waving a sock, maybe Pietro's or Osvaldo's. This is our hearth. Interesting, Tommaso said. Pero io, but I had a dream that I was awake like Osvaldo and I saw God. And so the story started up again, a story that reminded us that God lived under our mattresses, behind our beds, just out of sight. Our forefathers and even the Germans had come together around flames to tell stories, to try and make sense of what they couldn't understand, and that nobody's nonna could explain. Maybe each mystery in the world had coupled with a god or a story to make them less foreign. That's how you deal with fears. Give them a god, give them a story. But people have stopped getting together now. Other things are in the middle. Look at what we had. No hearth, no fire, just a bloody sock. On the Malaya, each of us had lost our center. But there, we found our stories anyway, and I could live and walk inside the memories of the others. I got to know Osvaldo's nonna, who said ciao piccolo to spiders, especially the ones that might walk over her face when she was sleeping. I walked with Pietro while he picked mushrooms on Monte Grappa, heard moo inside my memory of someone else's memory, trod on the fields of Organ's childhood before he ran away to sing in an osteria in Venezia and then at La Fenice. He was our best Orpheus, maybe, still singing his song. And so they come to Wales, and so they work the fields and they get to know the Welsh, and at some point Parthenius brings the end to the war in their understanding of it, and they see Mussolini's hanging at the cinema. War is war. Some were killed. We remember their faces and their names. But most ended up POWs. Not that they caught us. We gave ourselves in. You want my tank? Said Giorgio to one of the Australians. Take it, dai, prendelo. The story of our surrender would come back like that, like a scorpion's tail. Several versions, none perfectly accurate, appunto. Our fathers fought in the First World War. Watch out, they'd say. The English are not poor soldiers. We are on the wrong side now. Oh Dio. And we knew that was true once we had a white handkerchief in our hands. We had been kicked around France and Albania and then in Africa. The most chaotic army you ever saw, filled a tank with petrol, and after a while realized it had only been water. No tents, sleeping under anything like tramps, cardboard boxes if we were lucky. The smartest thing we did was give up. That part is the same in every version of the story, but in my version, there's Giorgio with his jolly voice. You want my tank? Take it, dai. Prendilo. Prigionieri eravamo proprio. What is prigioniero? What is a prigioniero meant to do but escape? That's what all the films taught us afterwards anyway. Any prigioniero worth his salt would have had his mind fixed on a scappatare, tunnel digging, barbed wire jumping. We were poor prigionieri, truth be told, except Giorgio, who saw his maker before seeing Wales. We heard the tale of one of us who threw himself into the River Conway. Not from our camp, not our type of prigioniero. He had a huge funerale with a parade, so said the commander who toured all the camps. But he was more concerned about trouble between two civilians and a POW in Bala the same night. Trouble in Bala was more news than a POW grave in Llandudno. We knew everything about those two Italians. They were both made into non-co-ops in a flash, taken from camp and put in another one far away. We never knew which. For us, being made to leave was more frightening than what we might escape. And so the gate was about half open and half closed. Prigionieri carrying guns, the world of war upside down. They didn't care about us coming out of the camp. Where would we go? Llandudno? The bottom of the channel? They were more worried we'd escape somewhere inside, if anything, exiled in our own heads, in our own bones, and stay there. Then they would have lost, and we, the prigionieri, won. Well, not won either. Nobody wins a war, not even the winners.
Thank you, Shan, and thank you all for presenting your work. We are really, and there's a lot to discuss and a lot to say, but we are also in the middle of well, perhaps not unprecedented, but a very unusual situation, the pandemic. This is why we are talking to each other like this. The pandemic, I could say, is in a way a kind of outcome of our war on the environment, it's something that we will have to resolve, and it will probably cause a kind of reset, societal reset, and reset of values, hopefully. What do you think? What do you think this combination of conflict, conflict not just in the Middle East, in many parts of the world, and of course, speaking from here, from where we are sitting, we are presenting a very very Eurocentric perspective. But what, as a kind of, before we close the this session, can you comment on where you think the pandemic will leave us? Shan, would you like to start? You're a person who, Shan is also someone who is very much, who lives or tries to live very much in agreement with nature, with the natural environment. And she also is a yoga practitioner and yoga teacher. When we were in India once together with some other writers, we did some marvelous sessions that she where she taught us the basics of yoga. And why it felt very special was that we were in this environment where we were with other writers. We were in a small kind of patch of a garden, and so in a small natural environment. And at that point, we wouldn't have imagined that we would be finding ourselves in this situation now. So how do you feel about it?
We've spoken about fear, and I've been very aware of every single time the word fear comes up in different writings today, including my own. And I think you've just identified the biggest fear, Alexandra, because I've benefited in terms of how my writing is shaped and who my closest friends are, so much from the possibility of direct exchange and living among and with other writers, not just, passing acquaintances in a festival, but really spending time and working together. And I feel fearful for the future of that type of work when it can only happen potentially through this medium, because as lucky as we are that it exists, it isn't enough. In terms of the writing, I think the novel in a way does speak to a strange nostalgia that many of us have felt in this time. So Giorgio communicates with the Welsh through nature, through plants. Now, okay, so that's kind of my obsession, isn't it? Coming through the main character, he doodles weeds and plants and is able to communicate to the Welsh, who don't speak English, please note, and the Italians don't really speak Italian, they all speak different dialects. So they communicate through their use of the land and their use of plants, and that's what brings them together. It's sort of survival techniques in difficult times, and physical work together for the main, from everyone having a main goal or a goal in common. And I think there is a nostalgia that many of us have felt in this time of more people going foraging, more people going for walks in nature and bringing things down to sort of basic, elemental, physical needs. And I think by accident, the novel speaks to something of that we've all experienced this year. And it is part of a sort of there's another novel that follows it, that follows the third generation and what remains of this odd, beautiful, passionate connection between strangers, what remains in the third generation, how does it trickle down? And I think we're yet to see really how what we're experiencing now in terms of pandemic, how does that impact our children? How does it impact our lives next year and in 10 years' time? How will we work? We don't know, but we do need to keep making these connections together. It's even more vital somehow, and we're finding newer ways to work, I think. And an interesting thing that's coming up for me, Alexandra, is that many of these opportunities are short-lived, and this time has given me the opportunity anyway to return to those connections that were made and maybe explore them further. So if trying to find a positive in this really difficult time.
Yeah, I keep saying that the situation has this cloud, has its silver lining, and it is that we can connect in ways we didn't connect before, but still something essential is missing. And I have to say that you spoke of nostalgia, but what I'm experiencing is almost a kind of dystopian, future. I was on a train yesterday, and everything that could break down broke down, including 2 trains. So it took me twice as long, and things were not working. The vending machine at the station where I was waiting was basically empty, and when I arrived at my destination, there was no one around, and it wasn't that late. It was like a ghost city. So it felt really suddenly. I felt this fear, and there was this repeated message on the train, wear your masks and so on, and it felt really like a kind of dystopian movie. So, Rabab, do you want to tell us how the pandemic has been affecting you, and what you think we may see once we come out of it, if we do?
Actually, there is a rumor says that Shakespeare wrote King Lear during the play. When I heard this information, I was like, this is strange, because we all went. I'm an introvert anyway. I don't like to meet people much, but still, it's. I like to work, for example, in a coffee shop when I can see people. Like what happened to you yesterday, I was walking around Berlin, and in the nighttime, it felt so isolated. It's like Damascus in the wartime. There's no fire, but it's hidden fear inside. Again, we go back to fear as if it is the theme of our existence, but it was always like this. I mean, humankind, they're always fearing something, death or a war or dystopia. But I don't think it's gonna last. I mean, the vaccine is here, hopefully, and the rumor says also that every 100 years the Earth is gonna come up with some kind of bacteria or virus that is gonna shake us a little bit. And it's a good thing to shake your existence, to see how much you had in your hands before the war, before the fear, before the death, before the pandemic. It's so beautiful at the time. I mean, it's a very bad thing to say beautiful, this word. But sometimes, yeah, I woke up in the morning, it's like in Berlin, but I'm still in Damascus. Part of me is still in the war, and part of me in the pandemic now. And I feel of our existence, how fragile it is, how many wars we have to go through inside ourselves, not war against each other or against the other. It's like to appreciate life more. And what Riyad said is true. We repeat everything. Even the pandemic is repeated, as if we have the memory of a fish, literally, like what he said. As if we don't learn our lessons. That's when literature comes. It's very important. Do you remember our last discussion? We're like, how much it is very important to write, and to have the victim to have a voice and a name for him or her, to have the voice and the picture of the victim of of the humankind actually. To give up, of course, journalism is very important, reporters are very important, but the picture is never full until you have art in it. This is the reflection of the real inside, that the depth that no report can portray, actually.
Kriyat, you have the last word now.
Yes, yes, actually, yes. I wanted to say that the last time, but it was not the right time. So I was like, okay.
Because unfortunately, we'll have to, I think we're running over time already. We'll have to draw this to a close.
Yeah.
Right.
What I think when I see our situation in the pandemic is the sadness of it. It's like the people under the bombing in Syria, they go to shelters together, they hang each other, they catch hand of each other, they flee together. Like it's even war have some human face where it makes some people more connect to each other and tie to each other. When I see this stupid COVID-19, what did in our society, that we will be in shelters, we are like in a war sage, but we should be isolated from each other, and this is anti-human for me. Like some people could take it, they began to be addicted to it, like they feel like they are in a cocoon, they have this routine. But for me, it's a death in a different way. Even if only 1% of the population of the world will die if we didn't have vaccine, but it's the death of the idea of us as a human. And I'm really I was shocked when I know that in the 7-year quarantine, as Rabbi mentioned, the 7-year quarantine of Shakespeare, he make this great joke. I will not be able to do anything in this unhuman situation, and it is. Maybe we will be able to do, but I will judge that later when we finish from it. And I will look, if I survive, I will look from outside towards this time and see what we learn, because this is the first pandemic after 1918 flu, the Spanish flu, where we have communication, we have airplanes, we have internet and like this. So we spread the virus more fast and we find solutions more fast. So we will see, but I really hate it. I will never say any good thing about this period. I could use another word. I will invent things. And even my poetry right now, the poem I write from 8 months now, it's called The Blue Marble. And it's the same name of the image that Apollo 12, I think, took when they were heading to the moon, 1972. They decided to switch the camera and took a photo of the Earth. And in this blue dark photo, you could see only Middle East and Africa. And it's really the size of apple. Everything we fight for is there, even the Palestinian question and all this thing. So it's remind me, this pandemic remind me how we are weak, how we are small, and remind me how much life was beautiful. By the way, you mentioned in the last part that I am a part of this Palestinian result, but I am not a victim. I never been a victim. I have the best childhood ever could be, and if the history I will be able to repeat it, I will repeat it the same. Most of the Palestinian is like me. We are never feel like victims. Actually, we are a result of this. Without this occupation, my father will not be thrown to Syria. He will not meet my mother. I will not be exist even. But what I want to say, I'm speaking about the injustice, about equality, how all people should be equal, and like this. That is another question. What I want to say, that in the time of the war, I will never felt like, I never feel with the fear, because I mean, in the time of the pandemic, I never feel fear because it is targeted us all. Mm. Like if there is asteroid coming from to hit the Earth, and we will extend like 65 million years ago, like the dinosaurs. That didn't make me afraid. What made me afraid is the war, that it target a group of people. When we die, all of us together, it's okay for me.
yeah, I suppose, the short answer to that is that we should be trying to solve the problem together, but I'm not sure this is going to happen. Thank you very much. We have to stop here. Thank you so much for your contribution, and thank you to the Pune International Literary Festival for having us. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're on. This was such a captivating and thought-provoking session. Thank you for making time in your busy schedules to speak to us. Coming up next, we have How to Crack a 5-Book Deal. Please join us at 5:45 p.m. Thank you.